Now, I started this set of videos many years ago, and it's blossomed to where we get comments on the channel virtually every day, and we try to answer them, of course, at the time the comment is put in, but then I try to save up the ones I think are worth sharing or appropriate, that the information shared would be useful to a lot of people, paintwork and motorcycles, and maybe some funny stories along the way too. But it's grown now exponentially to the point where virtually every day I get questions and I answer them all religiously. So if you have a question, you can always ask it after you've watched the video or even before. Ask the question, I'll try to answer it. But then if it's a significant question I think worth sharing, I'll try to answer it on the next question and answer video. And you can watch this whole presentation in full 4K. Adjust your device. So on today's video, we're going to try to share some really good paint information, and I've been working with with Scott on his project, another fellow named John, and I figured I'd put a lot of this information into one video if I possibly can. We also have some interesting information if you need to change an engine in a bike, and some interesting comments came in on the channel. I have some interesting information, and a few, of course, a few little funny stories. And this time of year, whenever there's ice on the road, I don't risk the bikes. So today will be a great question and answer video. Also, a couple of the comments that came in, there were some comments, I posted some ride videos of the GS, and some comments came in that I want to answer. And I want to keep in mind, I have both an R1, it's an '09, and this of course is an '82 GS. And I wanted to do some comparisons on them, and I think we'll include that in on this video. Anyway, let's get down to shop where it's a lot warmer. Nothing better than a cup of coffee when you get in from the cold. It's cold out there. This is in Florida. First question, and this is a question that has come in so many times from so many different people, and I just corresponded with John G about this, and I said, gee, I haven't put this on the video in a long time. Maybe some useful information, and it's something we might be doing very soon here. But keep in mind, this time of year, shop time is of the essence because we've got a lot of things going on here. And my grandson being on a basketball team is one of them. Okay, so his question was, he had painted some motorcycle parts that were plastic, and the paint didn't stick. What do I do? Well, it's pretty easy. The nice thing about paint is you're never married to it. Anything you paint, you can take the paint off and paint it over. It's not like cutting a frame with a saw and throwing the back part away and then 10 years later you want to put the seat back on. No, it's what happens with paint. It's a good thing to understand. Any paint, whether you're painting a guitar, a model plane, a motorcycle, you can always take the paint off. You can take it off sometimes. The easiest way is paint remover. Sand it off with a power sander. Sand it off by hand. You can always get it off one way or the other. It's not fun and it's not clean. It's a dirty job, but you're not married to it. It's a messy divorce, but you're not married to it. So anyway, this chain started out on my email of painting plastic parts, and nothing happened. The paint doesn't stick. I'm going crazy here. So I sent him several emails, and one of them is you got to strip the part back down to bare plastic. When you're painting over something, you never know what's underneath. You know, did they paint this in Japan 10 years ago with a different type of paint? In Germany, in France, where do you know? And nowadays, you don't know where these parts were originally painted. First thing is to try to get it, if all possible, get it down to raw plastic. We've done this on Joe Padula's fairing, among other things, the Ducati 888. Other parts that if you're not dealing with down to plastic, it's a lot riskier that you're going to spend all this time and it's not going to be to your liking. Anyway, so step one, sand it, paint remover it, do something, get it down to plastic. Now, whenever you have plastic, you got to keep in mind, plastic, there's a million different kinds of plastic. Some plastic, paint will stick to it like iron. Some plastic, I try to paint a PVC pipe sometime and see how that works out, just as an example. Some of the Chinese bodywork that Luciano has gotten from China, the paint stuck beautifully. Some I paint another part, not so much. You just hoping and praying that it's going to stick. So again, plastic, there's a lot of variations of plastic. Now, I know the basics of, because I owned a molding shop for 11 years. We molded model airplane parts from plastic, and there's a million different kinds of plastic. And the machine we used, you had to put mold release every few times you molded a part with basically silicone. That's usually what in the plastic when plastic is new. But the opposite in an old part, you don't know what's under there. You don't know, but once you get down to raw plastic, at least you know you're not dealing with somebody else's paint anyway. So that's step one. Now, what kind of primer to use? First thing I would do, get it sanded as smooth as you're going to be happy with it with 400 paper. Sand it wet, plenty of soap in the water. Always before you sand anything, clean the part with simple green. This is things I put on all the tutorial videos. Now it's in primer sealer. Primer sealer seals the plastic that the thinner in the paint, or the chemicals in the paint, should be a better way to put it, don't go down and turn the plastic, melt it, actually melt it. Because some plastic, if you take acetone and rub it on with a Q-tip, melts the plastic. So a lot of chemicals melt plastic. Okay, so once you sand with 400, the primer sealer. If it's still rough, you might want to sand that down with 400, put a second coat of primer. It's not going to hurt anything. Spray the color. Usually you need, if it's white, you need several coats. If it's black, you probably only need one coat. Red. And if you're painting red over white, you might need a gallon of paint. Or white over red, I should say. Anyway, and this is the basic 101 of this whole operation. Is once you have the color on there, and I suggest if it's metallic, don't sand metallic. Another little tidbit of information. If it's pearl, don't even put your fingerprint on it. Pearl, metallic, is going to be you want to spray it and get one coat of clear on it right away. Okay, so another question here is, and this is where there's debatable things here. I like to, when I paint the color, I like to let it sit overnight. You don't have to. You can wait an hour and go put the clear on. Most people think that you get better adhesion that way, but in my case, I'm old school and I just work in my old school way of doing things. And it has worked out well for me. Maybe it'll work out well for you too. So the whole bottom line here now is I want to get 2 thick coats or even 3 coats of clear on there. So let that dry, and it's to your advantage to let it dry 2, 3, 4 days, a week. But 1 day would be minimum. Wet sand it with 1000 grit, get out all the fish eyes, the dust, and then wait for a day that the wind isn't blowing and put one final coat of clear on. Then that'll have minimum amount of defects, fish eyes, dust in the paint, and buffing it out should be a piece of cake. Now, I also suggest anytime you're in doubt about any step of this, go to my channel. Make sure you're on my channel, not generic YouTube. If you're in generic YouTube, you have to put my name in quotation marks. And then put the subject, clear coating, clear, buffing, wet sanding, priming, anything that the topic that you want to know more about, and up will come plenty of videos. There's over 3,000 of them out there now. And the whole intention, the purpose of this channel is to share that information so you can have a bike that you've restored and you've painted and you're proud of.
Oh, our good friend Ray has 2 400 Kawasaki's, and one with a lot of modifications, and he lives in North Carolina, right on the tail of the Dragon. And boy, I'm jealous of these roads, Ray. Very, very jealous.
Okay, next question. Herbie. I love getting emails like this. This is really funny. Herbie rode his GS 1100E across the desert at 90 miles an hour, added a fork brace, and was not crazy about the brakes. Almost had some serious accidents at 80 miles an hour. So, he wasn't crazy about the brakes. Now, the point that I'm trying to convince other people of, there's a lot of people in our circle of friends that respond to the video. They've only ever ridden modern bikes, and pretty much all modern bikes, even from the least expensive one, have really good brakes. Relative to old RDs, and the GS I think is a little better than most bikes of that era, but it's a heavy bike and the brakes are not, I warped up this is a truth in advertising. I warped up 2 sets of stock Suzuki rotors before I put on the first set of, and thank you Pokey, by the way, and this is on the video, we did the swap on video, the EBC floating rotors. Now, floating rotors, stock rotors are mounted right to the hub. So a lot of times you get to a point where when the disc warps a little, even just a little bit, what would happen? Your lever is pumping and they're inconsistent, and as they get hotter, the brakes get softer. But that was brakes of the era. That's early 80s brakes. That's not what you have now. So what I did, a few years ago, we made a video of it. Pokey got me a set of brand new EBC brake rotors that float. They're like modern R1, MT09. They are on buttons, and the buttons allow the rotor to move ever so little. Makes for a nice solid feel. I also, Joe Padula at the time had gotten his GS 1100E, and he had bought some steel brake lines. He had extra ones, and he donated them to the cause. And I took off that anti-dive thing that nobody uses that unless you're trying to make the bike totally look stock. I found it to be useless. It's really just, I don't know what they were thinking, but anyway, mine is disconnected. The steel brake lines, the EBC rotors, and brand new pads, modern EBC pads, made the braking a lot better. But even though it's better, it's certainly not in a class with the MT09 or the R1 or any of the real modern bikes. Until you've ridden my RD, you don't know what mediocre braking is. Now, years ago, I remember back in the AMAR days, they used to sell brake pads, and they would, from the time, 70s technology, that were a little bit better than stock, but they chewed up their rotors. Well, you better have a bucket full of rotors in your collection. Now, I think over the years, EBC has gotten sintered rotors. I don't use sintered rotors because I know how expensive the rotors are. I just use the standard EBC pads, and they seem to be pretty good. And a couple of times I've had either a deer run out or a mailman jump out of his truck or something. And I think to myself, I'm glad I did that upgrade. And it's a great upgrade. I know Dallas has upgraded his. He has a GS 1100 that he's got a brake upgrade thing. And I know Joe has upgraded his. Joe did something that I had never even thought of doing. He took the stock rotors and had the guy machine them somehow. I didn't get involved in it because I already had the EBCs. But I have to talk to Joe, maybe get him to tell me the whole story. He had them machined or cleaned up or something on a milling machine. So again, the brakes of the era, you can make them a little bit better, but I don't think realistically you can make them like a modern, any modern bike. It doesn't even matter. And I can imagine on the high performance bikes, the real high performance bikes, where they don't care if you wear out the rotors because you've already spent $25,000. They probably don't make it so it wears out the rotors. But those bikes must be incredible. But keep in mind that's the same thing, and I always try to share that with people because a lot of people think like my old RD that the brakes are just like a modern bike. But you can make them a little better. That's the bottom line. It's going to cost a few bucks. You can make them better. The steel lines certainly help. But in the world of reality, they're still going to be 70s or 80s brakes.
Now, where it's really obvious, and it happens to me all the time, is I'll be riding one of the older bikes, a 70 or an 80s bike, and I get all adjusted into the braking and the brake points and the feel. All of a sudden, I get on one of the modern bikes, the R1 for instance, and you can go over the handlebars or do a stoppie. Well, with the GS, you never have to worry about doing a stoppie. I don't think so. But anyway, you do have to take into account where you're going to be hitting the brake, and well, like I said, when you have two bikes that are very different, one modern, one old, a lot of times you've got to take that first couple minutes of a ride and get that feel for the brake, especially the front brake. Get it all dialed in before the rest of the ride gets aggressive.
Now, another common question, I've answered this individually, but I'll just answer it now. It's a good time to do it. I hope I'm saying this gentleman's name right. It's Yandestri. I don't know what nationality that would be. I am half Ukrainian and half Russian, so I don't speak a lot of languages other than my own. And he asked, and it was a good question. He was watching some of the older FZR videos where the bike is the Ferrari paint scheme. And he asked me, did I polish the frame? Or did it come that way? Well, it didn't come that way. Now, Luciano's got the exact same bike without the polished frame. His came that way. He painted it. So I understand not everybody has the energy level or they're willing to commit to the amount of time that I did. Here's the problem. When I got the bike, and this is a true story, Luciano and I found the bike not far from his house, a couple miles from his house. The guy was selling it. It had just snowed. We went up to his house, and I looked at the bike, and it had been in an accident. It had several things. It had a Harley paint job on it with flames and skulls and dragons or whatever, Harry Potter things on a tank. But I got it cheap. Cheap always works. Now, we got the bike back to Luciano's house, and he was doing some work on the carburetors, and I said, well, he was taking the carbs apart, and they had leaked. They were leaking when I got the bike. And I had some compound with me in the truck, and I looked at the frame, and the frame was, I says, oh man, let's see if you could polish this out. I took my little buffing tool. Whoa, that frame is made out of material that polishes up very, very easily. But it's also got a coating, and I don't know what the coating, if it's paint, or if it's something they dip it in, some anodizing or iriditing or what. But both the swing, I did some of it in his garage, some of it home in my garage, where I had all the body work off. I had the whole bike down to just the motor and frame because I was painting the whole bike red and putting the Ferrari stickers on it. And I started the frame. And I said, whoa. And I got caught up in polishing that frame, and it took me more time than I want to admit, in a freezing cold garage where there was snow on the ground. And I didn't care how long it took, because I knew when I was done that was going to be one of the focal parts of the bike. Now, when I restored the bike for the second time, I repolished it and once you polish something, then to do it the second time is really, really a piece of cake. It's no big deal at all. But the thing to always keep in mind, it's polishing anything. The most prolific video that on my channel has the most hits is the one of polishing the swing arm of that bike. I don't know, maybe it's real. Maybe a lot of guys want to polish things, I don't know. But always be aware when you polish aluminum especially. There might be a coating on it that's clear. It could have clear anodizing on it. And before you're going to polish it, you've got to get that coating off. You can't polish that coating, realistically. Like the side covers on a GS engine, those aluminum parts, mine are all polished, but they have a clear coating, or if it's an 83, they have a black coating, and you've got to get that coating off. And paint remover doesn't put a dent in it. Acetone, ketone, nothing puts a dent in that material. You've got to grind it off. I got mine off with 1000 grit paper and a tremendous labor of love, and then over by the buffing wheel for many, many hours to get those polished parts. And again, some people would find it, that's not worth it. Some people have a passion for it. And I know Scott out west has polished up many of the parts, and we've gone back and forth many times. Scott has gotten his stuff polished up like a mirror. And I know other people that have just spent a day at the buffing wheel. And it's time consuming, it's dirty work, it's a labor of love, and when you're done, you're always glad you did it.
So anytime I think about polishing motorcycle parts, of course it's in the eye of the beholder. Some people like the look of flat aluminum. I like the look of polished aluminum. And I'm willing to pay the price. And no matter what you like, it's a question of, once you know how to do it, it's just it's a labor of love. And Joe Padula has a bike that's a lot more stock than mine. I'm not concerned with being stock as much as I want it to look like I want it to look. Look at the reflection of the leaves in that side cover. I like the look of those side covers being polished. Not everybody does. Look at that. I love that. And to me, all the labor I put into polishing this, to me, it's well worth it.
So another good question, my friend Clyde, and I have gone back and forth many times. coating the graphics with clear. And pretty much I addressed some of this in the beginning of the video, but if you put graphics on a bike and you put, here's the gas tank, oh, here's the tank, and you put Moto Guzzi here, well, normally you buy a bike brand new, even you buy an expensive bike, you can feel it. I can feel where those are, I don't even have to look at them. Well, on a custom bike, on a one of one, or some people that really are fussy about this, and I know from judging many model airplane contests where it's the #1 thing is that you can't feel where the paint edges are. Not everybody feels that way. Some people are happy with no clear on the bike, flat black. But when you want to have that something really ultra special, there's a very easy way to do it that I know. Get the decals on however you decide to do it. Turbo Steve happens to be a master of putting decals in place. Mark Morgan was real good at getting them. I never seem to be able to get the last bubble out of them. And I've made videos about it, but I don't count that I'm great at putting the stickers on. But now that they're on and you've got them all as good as you can get them and all the bubbles and wrinkles and everything out, now the next thing is I like to do is put on at least 2 or 3 coats of clear. Let it dry an hour between, and this was one of Clyde's questions, let it dry an hour between coats, even longer if it's cold. Where we're working here and it's 28 degrees, it may have to go overnight between coats. You can always tell, just touch it and see if your finger sticks to it. But anyway, beside the point, that we've got plenty of video showing how to spray clear. That the thing is now, when you get the 2 or 3 coats on, is to sand it with 1000 grit and be real careful. Don't get too carried away trying to make it ultra flat. Just get all of the little imperfections out. Put the final coat of clear on. And now if you just see yourself at the very end just going through an edge or you're coming up on an edge, let it sit, put another coat of clear on. But eventually you want, it's like decoupage, you want to bury it in clear. Once you can't feel it, now you can sand it with 2000 grit, buff it out with compound of your choice. But getting that buried in clear, think of decoupage. And all of these things, one of the good things that I think is, I try to, and so many people have learned to paint in my shop, Glenn and Najat and various other people, that have picked it up so quickly. I think, whoa, it's amazing. And when we were building model planes in the shop, people would come from all over, and Dave Midgley got to be a super expert, among other people. But the tricks are always the same. Don't try to rush the dry time is always a critical thing. And try to get enough over the thing that when you're sanding it, you don't go down and hit the edge of the sticker. And usually when you do that, when you're done, and you could, well, let me take an example would be this helmet. You can't, if I close my eyes, I can't feel that stripe. And every bike in my collection is like that. And one thing I noticed that I was shocked, because the MT-09 is a real low dollar bike. It was under $9,000. And when I put my hand over the MT-09 paint on the tank, I said, holy mackerel, they did a beautiful job. Yamaha did a job like Ferrari or Porsche or something would do. So, but the point is, if you want to have that note that you can't feel the edge, you've got to kind of sneak up on it with coats of clear, sand it, and be real careful not to go through on the edge. And when you're, again, just like I always say, when you're done, you've got something special.
Now, a really nice story, and one of the reasons I enjoy helping people learn how to paint. Najat had gone to the show in New York City, the Javits show. He wanted to paint one of his Ducatis, a purple, pearl purple. We went out and bought the paint. He wanted to learn how to paint, and boy, was he good at it right off the bat. This is my favorite shirt that he turned purple. I had to throw it away. It was all purple. Anyway, he learned very quickly, and I just think one of the things, if you're trying to help people or trying to teach them and they learn very quickly, it's always really nice. It's very rewarding. And in this case, he returned the favor years later when I wanted to convert all my videos over to 4K. He helped me pick out a camera, do some changes to the programming along with John Pothier, and got me set up for getting the videos that now virtually all of them are in 4K. Thank you, Najat and John.
So I got a real nice note from Gary, who has a 650, just like I have, a Ninja, 28,000 miles. The battery lasted 9 years. Gary, I'm impressed. I keep the battery on the trickle charger all winter. I'm very meticulous about it. I'm lucky if I get 5 years out of a battery. When I get the 5th year, I'm starting to think, but hey, you're lucky. I'm not. Maybe it's not luck. I don't know. Anyway, the lithium batteries seem to last about the same as the regular batteries, but they're a lot lighter. And he loved the bike. He said it's bulletproof. He has lots of other Kawasaki's in his collection. He collects Kawasaki's, but he loves his 650. I love to hear that because I always think that bike is so underrated. And you meet people you have never met before out on the open road, and you go for a ride with them, and they're looking and they think, oh boy, we're going to leave this guy in the dust. We're going to do this and do that in the twisties. And they look in a mirror and you're right there. So you wonder, when you spend a real lot of money on a bike, you wonder, do you have to? Anyway, some information that's interesting to me. Herbie, Hans Muth designed the bodywork on the GS 1100E. Now, I knew a German fella did it, and he designed the 90S, but I didn't know his name. Of course, my memory is pretty faded on a lot of stuff, that's for sure. But there's something very special. Suzuki came along, and all these years they had and they got up to 82, and I guess this fella, they hired Hans Muth. Well, he did a nice job. I think the 82 and the 83, they only did it for 2 years. Those bikes are, to me, very attractive. Now, to some people, they want the origami styling, or they want points or polka dots or something. I think those bikes are dignified. The colors they come in are very nice. And Hans Muth, of course, everybody loves a 90S BMW, so that's kind of, it says it all. And Dale has a 90S, by the way, that really is, it's got the faded in black to silver paint. Beautiful. Anyway, next one. Giancarlo. Now, I had posted up a video that, and when I was riding the bike, I think of the titles for these videos as I'm riding them. What goes through my mind? I mean, I don't sing opera. I try to think of something so that each video will have a unique title. Well, I was thinking, hey, my GS 1100, it's a pretty simple bike. But of course, relative to an R1, it's a simple bike, not relative to an RD. So when Giancarlo watched the video, he said, there's nothing simple on a 4-cylinder bike. And maybe to a point he's right, that there's 4 cylinders and sinking carbs and whatever. But there are things about it, and I alluded to this in the beginning of the video while I was still out in the garage. If I look back at changing the starter in my R1, it took me, with the factory manual, 4 days. And there is so many details in there, so many ways you can make a mistake. I did it all on video. It's 4 separate videos. Anybody wants to watch me suffer. It is not easy, believe me. It's not a job for beginners, and maybe not even a job for me. But I can imagine what they charge you at a dealer to do it. Holy mackerel. But anyway, the starter was bad about 5 years into owning the bike, and there was no choice to it. So anyway, changing it, I just rebuilt the starter in the GS not long ago for people that follow the channel. Yeah, you do it one afternoon. It's a piece of cake, 3 bolts, and it's out. And it's in your hand, and you go get the rebuild kit for 20 bucks. It's back in the same afternoon. It's no big deal. That's what I call a simple motorcycle. If another example is, if you think of a valve adjustment on an R1, just as an example, maybe even an MT-09, maybe any bike, a modern bike with shims, it's an involved thing. Draining the radiator, you most always have to pull the cams out on most bikes anyway. But anyway, and you got to have a selection of shims, and it's an all-day job. Now maybe if you're a professional mechanic, you can do it, it's in a lot less time. When you do it yourself, you don't want to make mistakes and stuff. But here's the other funny thing. I think it's funny anyway. You adjust the valves on a GS, you don't even need any special tools. The tools that are already in your toolbox and a feeler gauge, and you're done. It's pretty simple, straightforward. You turn the crank 180 and do the other side, and you're done. So, changing the plugs. If you've ever put a set of plugs in any modern sport bike, even the FZR, oh my God, you need a special wrench to get in there, and getting a 2 on the end of your finger, you could chew your fingers up putting them in. But GS, you could be listening to the radio and take them with a blindfold on. That's what I call a simple bike. It's not a question of is it simple, it's simple relative to modern bikes. So Giancarlo, I agree with you. 4-cylinder bike, yeah, it's not like a dirt bike where there's one plug and one carburetor. But simple, of course, is a relative thing. Now, we got one, I think we're at the end of this, I'm not sure. We had one more funny thing that I thought, I was saving this for the end. Let me see if I got it, if it's on here even. I don't want to leave anybody out. Okay, this will be the last one. Fitz. And a funny story is always a good way to end the video. Fitz, he agrees older bikes were, probably watched the same video, agrees older bikes were easier to work on. But the engine is so heavy. Fitz, I answered him this, but it's worth sharing with everybody. An engine, let's say it's 150 pounds, just to make a number up. When you're 30 years old, it's 150. When you're 40, it's 170. When you're 60, it's 200. And at my age, you go get two of your young friends to go help you take it out. Now, it's funny, and I got to remember that. That's always good to end on a funny video. I can remember the day Glenn was here. He had bought a Ducati ST4. We had to take the engine out. It had a crack in the mount. And we had three of us, and Luciano was, and I were both younger then, and of course Glenn was a puppy then. So this is about 10 years ago. And what happened is the three of us, Glenn brought the bike in, and it was 9:30, we all had coffee, and I said, stop worrying about taking the engine out. Glenn will remember this. I said, by lunchtime, the engine is going to be out, and it'll be in my grandson's wagon. He had a wagon, and so we could take it without having to carry it. And 12 o'clock, it was out. But we had three guys, and Luciano knew what he was doing, and I was strong. Now we're all at different places in our life now. I have a lot of pictures of that engine swap day that are a lot of fun to look back at. And there was a lot of funny parts of the story, but the point is, an air-cooled engine, for people that don't know, if you have an air-cooled, a GS 1100E, a Honda 750, the head is massive amounts of aluminum, so it dissipates heat. The cylinder block is much heavier than a water-cooled block because there's fins everywhere. There's more, you need the mass of aluminum to dissipate the heat. On a water-cooled motorcycle, you can have a little, like on a TZ250, you can hold the head in your hand. And on an RD, the fins are everywhere. So if you understand the technology, air dissipates heat very, very inefficiently. Water, a lot more efficiently, or liquid or antifreeze. So you can make the parts smaller and lighter, which is why modern bikes, they almost don't make air-cooled modern bikes anymore. There's a few, but the advantage of having a water-cooled bike, you can make everything smaller, everything lighter, but it becomes more complex with the radiator and a water pump and antifreeze, and then it's that thing of, is it a simple bike anymore? I don't know, but anyway, that's a funny story, and we got some great pictures of that day of swapping the engine. A memorable day in the life of Glenn, Luciano, and myself. We'll share that, and hopefully you won't have to swap any engines.
Now looking back here, and this is several years ago, we had the A-Team in full effect, and we used to all get together and work on bikes together. And Glenn, this is taking the engine out or putting the engine in his Ducati. Luciano was, of course, as I said before, we all were a lot younger. We had to come along and just working on the bikes in my garage. It was just some of the best days of my whole life, and we really had great memories of that time. This was a very special time of my life anyway. But we learned from each other, and we shared the information, and that's really the whole purpose of this channel. Now, if you have a project that you'd like to share with the people on this channel, you can get a hold of me just email me the pictures at fzrguy72618 I'll put that up on the screen later. And be aware that we're all in this together. We're all kind of trying to learn from each other. We're all trying to share information.
And that for me has been very rewarding because so many people, when I look back at the A-Team, learned, and we all learned from each other. And this is Scott in Connecticut, another Scott. There's Scotts everywhere. He's finishing up his RZ. He's got the final, I think he's buffing it right now. I have a before and after shot here at the very end. And this is just, I'm so happy when somebody can do this after watching videos and have relatively good success. And that's the part he repaired. Now Scott out west is using the videos to make up a seat cowl for the back of one of his bikes. We're going to have more pictures of that by the time we get to the next video. But everybody enjoying the interaction. So I hope you did enjoy the video, and whether you remember the A-Team years ago or you're just sharing videos, enjoying watching them, I hope that you really did enjoy the video and that you'll send us some pictures of your bike or your projects and we'll share them. Thanks everyone. Thanks one and all for watching.